I'm delighted today to have a really special guest in CEO of AO.com, John Roberts. Welcome to Property with OBI, John.
Proper coffee.
How have you been getting on, John, over the last few months?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been an interesting time. I mean, it's sort of a number of different lenses to think through. From an AO perspective, obviously we sell electricals, and electricals have been a lifeline for people. We sell them online, and online has been a lifeline for people. So we've had quite a responsibility to be able to re-engineer all our supply chains to serve a lot more customers and a lot of existing customers that have really needed us through this situation. So that's been a real, that was absolutely deep in the muck and bullets in the early days of it. But we made some early decisions around working from home, which really helped. So the physical logistical operation challenges came after the decision for our office-based people to work from home and leave all the lovely offices that you've so kindly helped us fit out over the years. So we did that. So we mobilised, I think we about 1,500, 2,000 people to work from home over about 3 days. I've never seen as many laptops. And so that was quite an interesting process. And then sort of working through a very fast changing picture of what's safe, what's not safe operationally. Can you go into customers' homes? Can you not go into customers' homes? Do you need to wear face masks? Don't you need to wear face masks? And everything that came with that. And then, very much sort of changing or re-engineering the engines as you fly. We never missed a day's deliveries, but had to reconfigure our whole operation to be able to work in a whole social distancing way, which means that you have real compounding problems on. You've got more product coming in because your sales are up. You've got therefore more product going out. You're less inefficient on unloading it. You're less efficient on reloading it, and you're less efficient at moving it around the warehouse as well. So all compounding problems, just physically, operationally, and the teams did a brilliant job. So so really proud of what everybody's done, and then we've got ourselves very much into a business as usual rhythm now of what that looks like. We don't see our people returning back to our offices, particularly anytime soon. We're trying as ever to be very understanding on what that means for different people. So we're flexible where we need to be, but our start position is why would we put those people in danger? And we've all learned how to use Zoom and Teams and Skype and all the various connotations of it all. And then never waste a crisis. But we take a different view where a lot of people think about that as a way to exploit people in the supply chain. Actually, we always look at that as never waste a crisis to deepen relationships. So our store-based competitors obviously had to close. 100% of the market migrated online. And that created loads of problems in the supply chain. So obviously those store-based retailers are cancelling orders all over the place. And so working with our brands and supply chain partners for how much of that gear can we take, how can we help them with that, what does that look like as we look forward. So when the stores reopen, how much is going to migrate on back into stores and how much is going to stay online. So if you're a manufacturer, how much do you manufacture? Are you working 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 3 days a week? How solid are the orders that you're receiving? Because a number of competitors have been cancelling orders right across Europe. If you look at Southern Europe, because most of the brands that we deal with are global brands, and Southern Europe have been on, their e-commerce infrastructure is a lot less developed than the UK. So their total market sales were more like 70% down. So if you're a brand what do you do with your factory production? So we've had a really intense 3 or 4 months with the brands trying to work out what that looks like as we get through summer and as we get into sort of traditional peak trading of things like Black Friday. And ultimately, I guess it's still a bet on the scale of the orders that you place. But what we've been working hard with them on are the contingencies to still be able to take the product. So it feels at the minute like we're taking anywhere else we can get our hands on.
And have your sales been up, John? Have you been really busy? Because my missus has bought a couple of things from you during lockdown. I think people just being in the house and staring at stuff actually I'd buy a new one of them.
Yeah, well, I would hope your missus would be a loyal customer, but yeah, you know, so we've definitely seen a sales increase. There's no doubt about that, right across all categories. You know, obviously everybody's working from home, so you know, things like printers, we just can't buy enough of them.
Right.
Bizarre one for me was bread makers. We just can't buy enough bread makers. Nintendo Switches normally last about an hour and a half in stock when we load them on stock. Chest freezers. And, you know, if you look at how well Malcolm's doing at Iceland, you know, obviously we followed that trend that people need somewhere to put it. Yeah. So literally just sourcing the right number of chest freezers was nigh on impossible in the early days. But things have settled down a little bit now. I think there's going to be headwinds and tailwinds from an AO perspective on, you know, if you think about the headwinds, we are unquestionably going into what is going to be a very, very tough recession, whatever happens now. You know, how deep and how long, nobody really quite knows, but I think it's just a matter of time. So obviously we're going to have to deal with that from a consumer spend point of view. We've also got challenges around the property market, which has been closed, and our industry index is almost 100% with new property market. Yeah. So that'll be a reality. We'll just have more cautious consumers around the whole piece. On the flip side of that, money's virtually free at 0.1%, and there is an availability of money. And we've seen a structural shift to online. So they say it takes 66 days to form a habit, and retail was closed for 84. So, you know, I'm an optimist. I've always thought it's a better way. I'm a bit biased in that as well, but I think it's a better way for our products to be sold. And so in that context, we think we'll be a net beneficiary of a migration to online. Exactly to what level, we don't know. We don't know what tipping points that'll create in the market. Obviously,
this is always your plan, wasn't it? This is always your plan. The tipping point.
It is, you know, well, it's already happening. Carphone Warehouse have closed their whole standalone store estate. Yeah. You know, so that wasn't COVID driven. That was happening anyway. So, you know, we think we've seen about 5 years of change accelerate into the first 5 weeks of this situation. Wow. So, you know, for us as a business, we view it as a responsibility that we have to be there to serve customers, and then we have to manage the ways of working in and around all that, with increased costs around logistics and warehousing and everything that go with it, so that we still ultimately at some point deliver for shareholders as well. But our obsession with customers and keeping them served while keeping our staff safe is paramount for us.
Now,
so yeah,
well, it sounds like you've reacted remarkably well. But what I want to ask now, and I'm sure everyone's interested in this, how did it all start? Everyone's read about the bet. Is that true?
Yeah, the famous £1 bet. It was a guy called Alan Latchford who actually sadly passed away a few months ago. But yeah, Alan and I had a job as a kid in a hotel called the Last Drop Hotel in Bolton, which is where we met, and we just became friends. We weren't natural friends. Alan was an eccentric mathematician, van driver during the day, and I was a young kid that liked drinking. I suppose actually that was the thing we had in common was drinking, and we played a bit of golf together every other weekend. So and he was going on about this thing called the internet. I'm still not a techie, but I definitely wasn't a techie then. I was a trader then, and my sort of thesis was that you could sell stuff on it. And Alan used to say, "Don't be ridiculous. It's not about selling stuff. It's about search. It's about search and arranging information." So, you know, if you think Google didn't exist in those days, you know, maybe I should have took his advice and we'd have done a bit better. But you know, I was just banging on about. I was adamant that we should be able to sell gear on it. So he'd had enough of it, and eventually on Christmas Eve 1999, when anything that we did, we had these honourable £1 bets. So he bet me £1 that I wouldn't stop what I was doing, give up my job, and actually go and do it. And the rest is obviously history. Yeah.
So when I first met you, I think it was called DRL. Were you?
Yeah. So that was because so if that was Christmas Eve 1999, I then spent. So I just got divorced, and my parents lived abroad. So I spent Christmas Eve enjoying myself with my pals in the pub. I then spent Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and the 27th putting together what I now know to be called a spreadsheet. Because the thing that Alan said is not only did he bet me £1, he said if I gave him the information, because he used to build websites in those days in his spare time, he would build me a website. So I saved all this thing called a database, which I just an Excel spreadsheet onto. Do you remember 3.5-inch floppy disks? And I had about a dozen 3.5-inch floppy disks. That I'd spent morning, noon and night putting together, and took round to his house on the 29th or whatever it was, and said, right, there you go, £1 man, build us a website. There's all the information.
You decided it was going to be white goods at this point?
Yeah, well, that was what I was doing.
Oh, you were selling them, were you?
I'd been working with a guy called Dave Wilkinson. We'd been running the white goods for Mogan Kitchens for a few years. So that was very much where I'd ended up, and so it was just very logical for me. So I'd literally taken catalogues and price lists and gone product code, description, cost price, selling price, and then taken them around to Alan's on these floppy disks and said, right, there you go, you build a website, I'm off to the pub. So he said, oh, I'll come to the pub with you. I said, you will not. I'd spent 3 days doing that. You'll be building a website. Anyway, I went to the pub, and then he rang me a few hours later and said, this website's available called appliancesonline.co.uk. Do you want to buy it? So I went, right, how much is it? It's 350 quid. So bloody hell, right. Oh, yeah, all right then. Okay, stick it on my credit card. Because I was going through a divorce, I didn't have any money. And then he rang me back about an hour later and he went, hey, you won't believe it, appliancesonline.com is available. Well, what's the difference? And he said, well, .coms if you want to go global. I said, God hell, Alan, cool your jets, yeah. Not made of money, 350 quid will do, we'll just have .co.uk. Anyway, there was another business called applianceonline.co.uk. Anyway, we cracked on and we ended up in a bit of an argument with them. So the solution was we became DRL Limited, trading as Appliances Online. And DRL was literally Dutton. So it was John Dutton was the third of the trio at the time. Me was Roberts and L was Alan Latchford. John only actually stayed with us for a few months, but has always been a great pal and has been really supportive of the business.
Which is a great business. You ended up growing it and then floating it. What was that like, going down to the city and basically presenting your baby to all these bigwig investors?
Yeah, it was. It was exciting. I've been asked. So the ultimate question I get asked on that is, would you do it again? The simple answer is yes, I would do it again. I do a few things differently, not a lot differently. But what was it like? It was exciting. It was interesting. I learned an absolute ton. but in truth, it was like going back to flogging direct sell
Yeah.
kitchens.
Yeah.
And you know, I went into full direct sell kitchen mode, and it, you know, it wasn't that complicated. We just had to learn the rules of the game. The biggest problem we had at the beginning of it was that Steve and I were walking around. We joked about being Mr. and Mr. Green, with our green suit and our green hat, like two northern monkeys. You know, shaking hands with people, saying, you know, Mr. and Mr. Green, please stiff us. We don't know the rules of the game that you make. The game you make the rules up for a game that you play every day.
And how long does it take to present to each of these investors? Do you get like an hour slot, or is it last as long as it lasts?
Yeah, it's normally 40 minutes, 20 minutes of Q&A. Same questions every time, so you get you get pretty accustomed to answering the questions.
And do you just
but some of the questions would say again.
Do you just live in London for a month while this goes on?
Well, so that our whole process went in about 3 or 4 stages. So one of the challenges we had is nobody had heard of us. So we had to do a whole round of education. Nobody understood our model. So we did bus tours of the business, full day bus tours of the business. Literally, we'd get 30 investors on the train, up to Crewe or up to Wigan, and we'd give them a bus tour around the different areas of the business. One of the things that I was proudest of actually was that everybody that came on the tour of the business placed an order at the IPO.
Really?
So that spoke volumes. And when we floated, we were 11 times oversubscribed. So we could have actually, you know, obviously we went for a reasonable valuation at the time. But in truth, we could have gone higher. We'd made an agreement with one particular shareholder not to breach 1.2 billion, and I shook hands with him on it, so we didn't. So it was a very, very interesting and exciting time. And in truth, it gave us exactly what we wanted, which was we wanted a return for our investors that had been with our day one investors, if you like.
Yeah.
And it brought a whole new set of investors into the business that were a different type of investor. And it gave us the fuel of funds in the business to go and do all the expansion into all the product categories and into new markets. And if you think, you know, we were only doing, I think, 280 sales or something like that at that point. And we're now through 1 billion, and we've internationalized the business, and we've taken the business into all sorts of new electrical product categories. And we wouldn't have been able to do any of that without it.
No. And you know that day when you actually float, what does it, you get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and you head down to your broker's office, do you?
Yeah, so we'd had a few drinks the night before. So the day culminates in the sort of the last meeting back at the lawyers you know, it was quite an enjoyable process for us because we were 11 times oversubscribed. If you're a bit twitchy on whether you're going to get over the line, then I would guess that would be quite a hairy last few hours. It normally finishes at about 3 o'clock in the morning, from what I'm told. I've only done it once, obviously, and we got done. We were in the pub drinking Guinness at 9:30.
What do you do that night then? What you do? Are you signing all the papers that night, are you?
Yeah, so sort of bringing it all together, doing the allocations. There is a mountain of paperwork like I've never seen. You know, there's the whole gravy train of lawyers and advisors. You know, I can't remember what we went through on fees, but we probably did 30 million quid plus of fees. Wow. So there's a lot of people running around trying to justify those fees, and you've got everybody's different lawyers and everybody's different advisors. So they just do their job, and then you end up signing where you need to sign. So we were done for about just after 9 o'clock, I think it was. So we were in the pub doing Guinness and Jameson chasers at 9:30. So we were up early, and we went to the JP Morgan trading floor for first day of listing, and to actually watch it get listed. Never been to a trading floor before, so that was an interesting morning. It was all a very surreal experience, in truth. because on the first morning of float, because we were 11 times oversubscribed, the share price popped and we went from 1.2 billion to 1.7 in the first like hour and a half.
Wow.
You know, I've never seen 500 million of value get created in such speed, and then eroded. I managed to do with one flip and comment with such speed as well. Only a few months later. So yeah, the whole thing was a great education, I guess.
And John, every time I come into contact with anyone from your business, no matter who it is, it's always been an incredibly strong culture that you've set and you've built. How did you go about that? Was that from day one, or did you suddenly think, shit, we're getting to quite a big size now, we're going to have to, you know, do things differently?
Well, so I think that it's very easy to rewrite history on these things, which I affectionately do sometimes. But I mean, there were 3 of us in an office to start with, you know, and so you don't start out. So we didn't start out. My lad from Bolton, we're 2 lads from Bolton, so. We didn't start with what culture we're going to build in this business. So a lot of it was centered in the early days around what we today would call a mission, which was to change the face of white goods retailing, and it was centered around a sense of sort of band of brothers and sisters. It was centered around being the underdog, very much being the David to Curry's Goliath and Comet, if you remember them.
Yeah.
So you know, so we were positioned as that. A lot of alcohol. You know, in truth, we used to celebrate everything we possibly could. We didn't work weekends in the early days, so we all used to sort of go out together as well.
Yeah.
And we were just all in it together. And so over the years, we've tried to maintain that. And I've always said that, so what is true and what we did recognise is, I've always said that opportunities look a lot bigger going away from you than coming towards you. And most people are not out there looking for things that are going to happen to them and opportunities that might be presenting themselves. But when we first started our business, you've got to remember back, it was 2000. It was squawky dial-up, you know. There were no pictures on lister pages. There's no such thing as a smartphone. You know, you used to click something and go and make a cup of tea while it loaded. So, you know, everybody forgets. So in those days, the only reason to buy from us is it was 40% cheaper than the stores, because the stores were basically ripping everyone off because it was a cost-layered supply chain. But everyone was making loads of money out of that supply chain, but therefore they were all invested in protecting that supply chain. So we had to try and dismantle and disrupt that. So it was purely price. We then went from price to not just price, but speed of service, because price, ultimately, eventually, they can make a strategic decision to close that gap. Then we went speed of service, and most of these businesses at the time didn't have great home delivery infrastructures or anything like that. So then we invested in that, and then we invented things like weekend delivery. I mean, it's crazy to think about it now. Weekend delivery did not exist. You would order week 1 for delivery week 2. So things like delivering on a Saturday or delivering next day, when we invented next day in our space, was just maverick. I mean, it seems obvious now, but it was crazy at the time. And I gave our lads 2 weeks to do it. So it was very much the answer is yes. What's the question? How do we keep evolving that proposition? And then I guess the defining moment was every bit of that is what you do. And all those things, technically, anybody can close the gap on that. The one thing that people can't close the gap on easily is how you do it. So, you know, it's that great old phrase, isn't it, that that people don't always remember what you told them, but they remember how you made them feel. Yeah. And so the way to get people to remember us for how we made them feel was to have great people, and have great people that that really genuinely cared And then the next big phase of that for us was real empowerment. And again, that was huge leaps of faith. You know, we've taken some horrific or horrendous or really exciting, hairy leaps of faith, whichever way you look at it, over the years. But to give everybody across our business the autonomy to have complete decision-making for what they do for a customer would be very alien to most businesses. And we sum it up today now very simply with treat every single customer as if they were your gran. And everybody knows what roughly that means. They can all have their own interpretation of what that means, but everybody knows what that means. And then if you've got to go and have dinner with your mum at the end of the day, when you're thinking about making a decision, think about explaining it to your mum at dinner. And would you be proud of the decision that you took and the reason that you took that decision? And if the answer's yes, if you've made gran happy and mum proud, well, we've got a great business, haven't we? Well, and then the cost output of that, it's just the cost output. So if we've screwed something up for granny, fix it. Don't argue about it. My gran would want a very simple thing. She would want an apology delivered emphatically and sincerely, quickly. And then she'd want you to bloody put it right. Yeah. My gran wouldn't get into a compensation conversation. If you apologised emphatically, she'd say, right, okay, well, what are you doing about it? And if you said, we'll have you another one there this afternoon, or in an extreme case, look, I'm really sorry, just have it for free on us. And they've got all the autonomy across the business to do those things. And as I say, that would be scary for most businesses. Yeah, very. Our people don't come to work, and most people don't go to work thinking, hey, I'm going to really cock it up today.
Well, I was going to say, how have you managed to keep the culture as strong when you're not seeing each other every day for the last 3 or 4 months? But you probably already answered that question with those two very simple mottos. Even I can understand those, and I think
keeping the culture strong is different to the moment by moment serving grant. So we have done a lot of extra stuff through this lockdown of touching in with people. You know, from all management, you know, leaders through our business, touching base with people, being very visible, great communications. We have a culture of candour, and I always say candour for kindness, not cruelty. And you know, never before has it been more important. They're looking for people. They just want the truth, in my experience. And I think lots of business and lots of leaders are frightened to give it to them. And they think if they dress it up in fancy language, they're really clever. Actually, I think they're pretty stupid, because most people are not stupid. And, you know, most people can smell bullshit. And, you know, the great old phrase of you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. It's still a turd, yeah? And people know that. So I think that our very straightforward, no-nonsense, consistent way of communicating with people has really paid dividends through this, and it's changed. Instead of getting, I mean, from a personal perspective, on one level, it's been great, because every month I used to go around every location and go and do, you know, every major location and go and do State of the Nations and give people the opportunity for Q&As and, you know, real face-to-face. I'll take any question from anyone, nothing's planned. And now I just get to do one video for the whole business.
Well, that's good use of time. Look, John, you've helped me through my career, give me some really good advice down the years. But who's inspired you, and who's given you really good advice that you've listened to? Because I couldn't imagine you listening to too many people.
So, well, as a kid, there was a guy called Peter Hopkinson who had a business called PJH Group that's still around, and actually a competitor of ours. And he was a great inspiration for me as a kid, because he was an orphan from Newcastle that had a very colourful life and ended up being a bouncer for a madam in Paris, and then got deported from Jersey, ended up back living in, I think it was Prestwich, where he met his sweetheart, Sonia, and then he married her and started selling kitchen sinks out the back of his car and had no money. And from there, built the biggest kitchen and bathroom distributor in the UK. So to me, he was a shining example of anything's possible. And you know what? People just come up with excuses for why they can't do things. So I kind of came at it from a very young age on the answer's yes, what's the question? With just the belief that if he can do it, honestly, anyone can do it. He was digging trenches in Newcastle with no parents and one kidney, smoking 40 Marlboro Lights, 40 Benson and Edges a day. And, you know, I remember right up until he died, you know, he was one of the very few people that could outdrink me on Jameson whiskey. And so on lots of levels, he was a great example of what's possible. I think, you know, on a completely different spectrum, Jeff Bezos and how Amazon go about doing things. You know, we started our businesses within a year of each other. So if I ever think we're doing well, he's a great reminder of what underachievers we are.
Have you met him?
No, I've not met him in person, but I've met a number of his team, actually, senior team. You know, if you look at somebody like Dave Clark, who was with him in '99 when I think he started in '97, and Dave runs all group operations and logistics, you know, he's got over 1 million people report to him now, and an airline and all the rest of it. But that core team that started with him at the beginning, and Jeff Wilkie, who now runs global retail, and the guy who runs Amazon Web Services, they were all there right at the beginning of that business. And so, yes, they'll get brilliant people around them to do lots of things, but it proves that people can grow with a business to that scale. So I think they're just a brilliant example of obsessive customer behavior. You know, they made the decision I think it was the end of last year, to give free one-day shipping in the US. And sacrifice 800 million of bottom line a quarter, just because they felt it was the right thing to do. I remember, you know, it's mental, isn't it? But great, you know, if you're gonna demonstrate to your business what you're about, what great leadership. In the UK, going back way back, when they first launched Prime, anybody who hadn't used Prime for a year, they took a decision to refund them the cost of Prime. I think it cost them about 30 million to do it. No other business would do that. No other business that I can think of would do that. So I think, you know, I think they're an incredible example of just what's possible. And lots, you know, lots in between. You know, somebody like Richard Branson, in terms of, you know, the cheek of when they started Student Magazine, of, you know, the stories of, you know, he tells his stories great, and I've been lucky enough to meet him a few times, but about, you know, when he'd be, you know, doing an interview with someone and he'd get his PA to come in and go, "I've got Elton John on the phone for you. Oh, tell him I'll ring him back." And it was just all nonsense, and they'd be going out to the payphone outside and ringing in to make it sound busy. And, you know, and then how has he managed to then pull off, at the end of the day, he's a tax exile, and he pontificates on what we should do in this country, on what we do and what we don't and don't invest in. So I think my big message on lessons is to learn as much from people what not to do, as much as what to do. And, you know, I'm sure people do that with me as well, because we've all got our faults. And be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be, but take influences, good and bad, from everybody else. And
I wanted to finish off, because over the last, I don't know how many years, is it about 5 years, the amazing work you've been doing with Onside, looking after young people throughout the whole of the country. Some amazing stories, and the work that you've done there, and the energy you put in as chairman. I mean, you've taken it, or you're taking it to a new level. What's the update? We've not spoken a bit about it for in terms of the latest plans.
Yeah, well, so we've got the club about to open in Manchester. That should have been open by now. We're hopeful that we can open next week or maybe this weekend. So there's some harsh realities. Yeah, the talent is evenly distributed in this country, and opportunity is not. Westminster is fast asleep. The politicians need to wake up. There's 700,000 kids across the UK that don't go to school in the way that your kids and my kids go to school. And repeated governments of all colours have failed in social mobility to improve the life chances of those people. And, so if you're 75% of kids that are NEET, as in not in employment, education or training, 75% of them will be NEETs long term. And the system is broken on how we provide opportunities for them.
Yeah.
And stereotypical ways of educating them don't work. So we need to think differently about that. And so, with on-side youth zones, what we've done is build a model for how to inspire kids outside of the school gates. 80% of a child's education happens outside the school gates. Or virtually all youth crime happens between the school gates closing and 8 o'clock. Right. Well, if Janet and John went to solve a problem, let's look at what there is for them to do between 4 and 8 o'clock. Oh, nothing. Right. Shall we do something about that? So what we've done as a nation over the last 5 years is close 600 youth centres. There's nothing for these kids to do, and the government doesn't have a plan of what they're going to do about it. So, we try and unite business leaders to come in and step in and solve the problem. We've opened 14 now, and we're opening a new one about every 12 weeks. We need society to engage as much as we need government to engage.
Yeah.
And, we've got to solve our own problems. And I think too much as a nation, we look at government. Government is not equipped to solve all the problems. If you look at the National Health Service, in truth, I'm not criticising the National Health Service. They've done a phenomenal job with us in coronavirus, but they should be rebranded. It's not a health service; it's an illness service.
Yeah.
And we only engage with the NHS when we get ill, and so what we need to do is actually societally inspire people to do more exercise, to live more healthy lives, and then we'll have a sustainable NHS. If we keep having diabetes and obesity at the rates that we do, we don't have a sustainable NHS. People are living longer and we're getting more cures for diseases. That isn't a problem government can just solve. We as society have a responsibility to do that. And youth zones are exactly the same. Everybody has something to give, whether it's as a volunteer, and go and lead a football team, go and teach the kids how to box, go and teach them how to do a climbing wall, go and teach them how to learn an instrument. The mentor always gets at least as much as the mentee in that process. All our volunteers always say it's one of the best things that they've ever done. Giving something back. Life isn't all just about accumulation of wealth. And, wouldn't it be better than watching Coronation Street in Emmerdale? Actually, you were helping some kid. Those kids can't follow in footsteps that they can't see. Everybody can lay footsteps for them. So it's not everybody can do different things, whether it's financial, whether it's getting business engagement, whether it's giving them examples to follow in, whether it's teaching them something. And so onside is that it's a building where magic, frankly, just happens. We just create the environment for it to happen. So it's frustrating, rewarding, exciting, exhilarating, and or probably all in pretty equal measure. But the single biggest thing out of it is the kids never ever fail to blow you away with their talent and just the passion that they've got for life that we as adults knock out of them.
Well, John, keep at it, keep banging the drum. You're making a massive difference. You really are. And listen.
And thanks for your help in it as well. Obviously, you guys have been brilliant supporters.
No, I love it, what we do. But John, that was fascinating. And thanks so much for your time. I know you're a busy man, but really appreciate you coming on today. I'm sure everyone will really enjoy that.
Absolute pleasure, Will.
All right, mate. Take care.
Take care. Cheers.
Cheers, John. See you, mate.